Welcome to the first part of a new video series on phenomenology, where we will be discussing the nature of memory from a phenomenological view. Phenomenology has increasingly been gaining my interest as time goes on, mainly for its direct relevance to personal experience and the seeming primacy of its truths. For those who are new to phenomenology, phenomenology comes from the Greek words phenomenon and logos, meaning the study of what is shown, or the study of appearance of consciousness. Husserl was the first to establish the movement in philosophy, the systematic reflection upon the structures of consciousness and the phenomena inside our minds. Phenomenology is usually descriptive rather than explanatory, since part of the phenomenological method includes abandoning previous beliefs about how the world is constituted and taking the world to be exactly as it appears to the conscious perceiver instead. A good understanding of the phenomenological process can be obtained from understanding the phrase, X stood out to me. The phenomenologist Binswanger makes the claim that our perceptions do not identify objects as such, but rather they identify different meanings. The reason we perceive a book as separate from the table that it lies upon is because there is a meaningful distinction between the two objects. This makes it the case that what causes the contrasts of our fields of perception is the contrast in various different meanings that shine forth to us. An object therefore stands out to one person in the room, but it may be a different object that stands out for another. One person may notice the fine patterns in the fabric of a pair of curtains, whereas for another person, they may be more drawn to the contrast of the curtain's colour with the surrounding room. Depending on who the perceiver is and what they desire, different objects will stand out to them. The perceptions that stand out to all of us are what is common between us, but rather than claiming this makes these objects an objective external reality, some phenomenologists would instead claim that these show the universal structures of meaning that different people have within themselves. Again, this is not a claim that this is explanatory of any metaphysical reality at all. Rather, it is a claim that this is how the appearance of consciousness arises to the individual who perceives it. Another good example of this is the phenomenology of time. We can know for certain that everything we are experiencing or ever have experienced is a component of our own mental phenomena. It can also be argued that everything we perceive and hold in our consciousness is drawn from the present moment. We are beings who are experiencing in the present, and are beings whose every thought relates to phenomena that exists in the present only. I'm sure you can see the phenomenological shift that takes place when we recognize this fact. We realize that if this is true, then our conceptions of past and future are really by nature two different ways that we categorize the present. Since we make this distinction normally, we can also tell that the distinction is caused by two different appearances of meaning in the present, taking Binswanger to be correct. So bearing these facts in mind, let's move on to how we may determine the phenomenological nature of what memory is. Please bear in mind that this is an incredibly complex issue, and by no means am I claiming that this is a definitive account of what our memory appears to be, but rather these are some of my own realizations I've had about the complex nature of experience. They are incredibly abstract, and it is important to remember that we rapidly move away from common conceptions of how the world is constructed when dealing with phenomenology. What memory is commonly thought to be is that which relates to the past, that which holds an impression of past events. Imagine looking at the banks of a river and seeing the marking of high tide in the earth. All we are in tune with is the present state of the river and its banking, yet the impression of the past also manifests itself to us, similar to the streaks of water that we see moving down a window. Here we can see that, although we only have access to the present, we rationalize a narrative to explain how the present came to be, an explanation of the constituent elements of its creation. The past is a story we use to orient ourselves towards what we find meaningful. By creating an explanation of how the present came about, we gather a useful tool that provides us both the security in knowing what we are in relation to the world, and also what the world might be able to become based on this story. Again, the reality of the past narrative is besides the point for phenomenological inquiry. The process of remembering is largely similar to the conceptualization of a past sequence of events, except for the fact that it is personal to us. So we must find something in the present moment relating to ourselves so that we can speculate about its origin in order to start remembering something. So going about this, we should first think about personal identity. Our personal identities are largely wrapped up with the capabilities of our will. Both what we might hope to become and also the abilities, including the ability we have to remember things in the present moment. It's therefore the case that from the phenomenological point of view, the act of remembering is tightly linked with drawing one's focus to the reactions that they are having to the present, and to the capabilities of actions that they have in the present also. These capabilities are not much different from beliefs of the will. A certain memory, then, can be drawn from the present by adhering focus to the shape of the will in the present, as that certain memory has imprinted the belief that they felt a certain way in a previous moment, and more importantly, that they are capable of feeling that way that they felt at all. The narrative of the memory is formed from the perception of the tools that the individual has available to themselves. When we observe the present moment, we find ourselves with a number of capabilities. We may know that we can catch a ball if a ball were to suddenly come flying towards our face. And we may explain this with a memory from our childhood, the memory of playing catch with one of our parents, for example. But there are many ways we can catch a ball coming towards us. So how do we get the specific details of the memory from that experience? Well, for a start, we have an incredible ability to be nuanced in our actions. We also have certain emotions tied up to the event of catching. We have the belief that trying to catch a ball would simultaneously relate to all these tiny microcosms of emotion within us. And these are part of what allows us to fabricate this incredibly rich and complex story from a previous time that is now lost. Now we should note here that some people hold the belief that all consciousness is memory and nothing else. I don't hold this belief, but I don't want to get into such a discussion at this stage, so for now we're going to leave it aside. We also need to note that a great deal of the phenomenological chaos and uncertainty we face, especially in the external world, is down to our conflicting wills. It was a belief held by a number of the phenomenologists that at some level, everything that appears in our realities is a result of our own desires. We can see this in the clear and obvious way by the fact that when we act in the world, it produces a certain result as a consequence. But also from the earlier principle we went over, about how the world appears to you in relation to what is meaningful to you. The extent to which this happens is unspecified. Separate from whether or not this is the way existence is constructed, there is certainly a case to be made that this is true phenomenologically speaking. After all, everything seemingly external to us actually exists within ourselves, and is understood by ourselves and relates to ourselves. Not only this, but it only appears to ourselves based on our own desires and what our unconscious or our body or whatever you want to call it is telling us is useful information that we need to be paying attention to. We wouldn't recognize it if we had no attention paid to it at all, after all, would we? So granting this to be true for now, any unexpected or undesired outcomes in the world would be a consequence of the conflict of two separate wills within us. Another point that could be separately considered true from a phenomenological perspective. Therefore, this view shines light on the war within us, the landscape of drama in which the wills of our heart battle each other out, and that is often displayed using archetypal imagery. Observing the changes that play out in what we call the present, then, directly inform us of the state of the conflict of our inner wills, and most importantly, who we think we are. This could happen in very subtle and minute ways, like the signs of things and objects in the room that we are drawn for, which we often call signs, or it could happen in a more concrete way, where we are talking to someone that we have an interest in, and our words don't get the desired reaction out from them, perhaps because of our own unconscious failings. The phenomena from what we call the present are the most freshly digested into the inner drama of the self. They are viewed through the lens of having begun to create the future states of the self. The wills that we have not remembered and made conscious will end up directing our life as if it were fate. It was Descartes who claimed that since we know what it is like to learn motions with the hand, some of our memory must reside in our hands. Perhaps a more phenomenologically accurate notion of this memory would be to say that in the present moment we possess a belief about the effects of our will on the appearance of our phenomena, namely moving our hands. The idea that we have learned how to play a song on piano from hours of practice may be true, but the memory is just an explanatory narrative about this belief that we have, that we can alter the phenomenology using our will in the present. So then, what is representational memory? Well, every time we are representing a memory in our minds, we are synthesizing a set of so-called past states and beliefs with the new phenomenological environment to reorder the structure of higher order beliefs that we hold. We have certain beliefs relating to the phenomena that we experience at the moment, and we also recognize old beliefs about what we used to be able to do that we have held in our consciousness. We compare and contrast these, and this helps us come to an understanding of how the past led to the future, and also how we have changed as a person. In fact, this could be the only reason we would ever need to use representational memory, so that we can observe the harmony and disharmony of previous beliefs with the current environment. So, that was the first episode of the Phenomenology podcast. I'm going to wrap things up here for the sake of time, but I feel like we went pretty fast so far in this conversation. Feel free to disagree with me about the phenomenology of memory. I'm still trying to figure it all out for myself, so please let me know your thoughts in the comments if you have anything to say. I'm excited to do more of these episodes, so if you'd like me to touch on the phenomenology of any other subjects, please let me know that too. I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Until the next video, I'll see you then. Goodbye.